So imagine if you was one of the top narco kingpins in the world, and you was on a run, and you had to run and hide and run your cartel empire from behind closed doors, on the run, searching and being hunted. Every time you hear a car or a helicopter or a raid coming. Today, we're gonna take y'all into that. The world of the last remaining big cartel leaders that's still alive, running around, running their cartel from wherever they at, from the trenches, still alive, out and free. Some of them made $1 billion a day in their heyday. $1 billion in their heyday? Let's take y'all into it. Top cartel leaders that's running their cartel, that's still alive, never been caught. It's crazy. This episode, everybody high.
$1 million for information leading to the arrest of the Mexican drug kingpin known as El Mencho. He's blamed for a flood of narcotics into the U.S.
When you think dangerous and brutal drug lords, you probably think of Pablo Escobar and El Chapo. But ever since Miguel Felix Gallardo, or El Padrino, took control of the entire Mexican drug business and established the notorious Guadalajara cartel, many other people have tried to grow their own organized crime empires. Escobar has been dead for a long time, and El Chapo is currently in the United States' highest security prison. But there are several more terrifying drug lords that are still active and wreaking havoc today. Let's explore their stories. Jesus Alfredo and Ivan Archivado Guzman Salazar. These are Jesus and Ivan, the sons of the notorious kingpin El Chapo. Today, they're just as ruthless as their now incarcerated father. After the Guadalajara cartel was dissolved in 1989, El Chapo, or Joaquin Guzman, grew his own empire, the Sinaloa cartel. It became one of the most violent, bloodthirsty, and power-hungry cartels in the entire world. At its peak, the Sinaloa cartel controlled half of the Mexican drug trade and made $3 billion every single day. El Chapo was a ruthless kingpin, killing and maiming his way to the top of the pyramid. But he was also a family man. El Chapo had upwards of 10 children, and his eldest sons were his most trusted servants.
They are known as Los Chapitos, the four most trusted sons of the world's most notorious drug kingpin.
El Chapo's two eldest sons, Ivan and Jesus, took charge of trafficking. They coordinated transportation from Colombia and Ecuador to Mexico, then from Mexico to the US. Then, they oversaw the distribution of narcotics to wholesale customers in the US and collected subsequent proceeds. But soon enough, Jesus and Ivan stepped out of their father's shadow. When El Chapo was arrested, they grew the Sinaloa cartel by building new, more sophisticated labs and expanding transportation to ships and planes. They might sound like they're just good businessmen, but the Sinaloa cartel also deals with bribing officials, killing enemies, threatening their families, and even killing authorities who stand in their way. In 2019, Ivan led an extremely bloody rescue of his half-brother, Ovidio. Ovidio had been arrested by the Mexican police, but Ivan couldn't handle it, so he sent a whole army of sicarios to his rescue. Officers and civilians lost their lives in the process. Jesus is no angel either. Apart from overseeing trafficking and bribing officials, he ordered assassinations and kidnappings. He's the cartel's mad dog, as well as the brains behind the labs and transportation. Today, there are $5 million rewards on both Ivan's and Jesus' heads. They're considered the new rulers of the Sinaloa cartel. This is Ismael Zambada Garcia, aka El Mayo. In 2016, El Chapo was arrested and extradited to the US to spend his life in prison, but shocked the world when he said people should be looking at the real leader of the Sinaloa cartel, El Mayo. El Mayo has been around for a long time. He was friends with El Padrino and climbed the ranks of the Guadalajara cartel together with El Chapo. But El Mayo wanted to be his own boss. Even after his own family was killed by a rival cartel, he continued to climb the ranks and establish himself as the Sinaloa boss. By 2000, he'd superseded El Chapo, who was in prison in Mexico and was smuggling thousands of tons of Colombian candy, dust, smack, and pot. In 2009, he was indicted for his crimes against the US. The indictment said,
he employed sicarios, or hitmen, who carried out hundreds of acts of violence, including murders, kidnappings, tortures, and violent collections of drug debts at their direction.
The Sinaloa cartel is a really nasty one. They even kill women and children. Sometimes the sicarios violate women and force their families to watch. It's not even about the money anymore. It's about power and unspeakable violence. And as the DEA are fighting hard to catch El Mayo, several more people fall victim to the Sinaloa cartel. Today, there's a staggering $15 million reward for any information leading to El Mayo's capture. While El Chapo's sons, Ivan and Jesus, had various run-ins with American law, El Mayo continues to evade the DEA to this day. Aged 74, he's still one of the most ruthless drug lords out there, and he hasn't spent 1 minute inside of a prison. Let's leave Mexico and fly to Honduras, where one of the most dangerous drug lords might be hiding. This is Julian Archaga Carillas, or Porky. He's the leader of the brutal MS-13 gang. In November 2021, Carillas was added to the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives list. He is wanted for racketeering, narcotics trafficking, and firearm offenses. But just like most drug lords, Carillas doesn't just do illegal business. He orders hits on anyone involved in rival gangs, and might even take pleasure in doing the deed himself. In 2008, he was convicted, charged, and sent to prison in Honduras. But 2 years later, he escaped in the most violent way. An army of 20 gunmen dressed in military and police uniforms stormed the courthouse. While Carillas was brought there for a hearing, they killed everyone on site and took Carillas with them. To this day, he is wanted both in Honduras and the United States. It's believed he is hiding in Honduras, but truth be told, he could be hiding anywhere, all the while ordering hits and leading the MS-13 from the shadows. This is Nemesio Asegura Cervantes, aka El Mencho.
Tonight, the DEA is offering $10 million for information leading to the arrest of the Mexican drug kingpin known as El Mencho. He's blamed for a flood of narcotics into the U.S.
The Sinaloa cartel is not the only scary Mexican cartel. The Jalisco New Generation Cartel, or CJ&G, is an equally bloody, ruthless, and power-hungry cartel, and it's run by none other than El Mencho.
Caucho, una aguililla, caucho, heridos, X13, caucho.
This is just one moment recorded by Vice, when 14 officers were killed and many others were wounded by the CJ&G. Throughout the last 2 decades, CJ&G are responsible for hundreds of civilian deaths and endless bloody wars with rival cartels.
CJ&G is the single criminal organization most responsible for these deaths on both sides of the border.
Part of Mexico is unsafe to live in simply because of the constant wars carried out by CJ&G. El Aguaje was literally turned into a ghost town after one particularly bloody battle. The town was deserted because of El Mencho's ambition to control the Mexican drug trade.
De un año para acá, fíjese cómo el Aguaje se convirtió en un pueblo fantasma. Las casas pues ya no son las mismas. Todas están balaceadas.
El Mencho first came to the U.S. as an illegal immigrant. After he was deported, he started working for the Millennial Cartel. He slowly climbed its ranks, and when the Millennial bosses were killed or put in jail, he decided to start his own cartel, the Jalisco New Generation. CJ&G quickly became one of the most brutal cartels out there. El Mencho had people infiltrate the police, so they always know when they're threatened. When El Mencho found out the authorities were planning to arrest 2 smaller bosses, El Ere and El Apa, he ordered an operation meant to distract the military. It was a particularly bloody one. CJ&G makes a big thing out of its military equipment and heavy artillery. It's believed that this is how El Mencho eludes the police to this day. He's not on the run. He's perfectly safe in Michoacan, where the cartel is based, and he's always surrounded by a military-trained army. Anyone that would try to arrest him would end up getting shot well before they got close to him. El Mencho doesn't believe in bribery, like the Sinaloa cartel leaders. Instead, he uses sheer force and intimidation to get what he wants. For his soldiers, this is an honorable thing. CJ&G loves El Mencho.
Yo sé quién es mi patrón, señor Don Mencho, una persona muy honorable y las personas que lo conocen saben la calidad de persona que es. Si yo no pensara de la forma que yo pienso, yo no perteneciera o no fuera parte de este cartel.
El Mencho rules with fear. Every CJ&G soldier sees what happens to those who disobey him. They have no choice but to respect him. As of today, El Mencho is Mexico's most wanted. Why? His cartel is now targeting the Mexican military.
The latest cartel target, Mexico's military. The Jalisco New Generation Cartel took the fight to the next level, shooting down a military helicopter with a rocket-propelled grenade.
The helicopter was thought to be tracking El Mencho. He couldn't have that. According to the DEA, El Mencho is even more sneaky.
And all that violence is only to have leverage in the negotiations with the government, with politicians, right? They create these chaos to go and sit with the local politicians and say like, okay, do you want more or shall we negotiate this stuff?
It really seems like there is no end to El Mencho's lust for power. If the authorities give him what he wants, he will only militarize some more and make CJ&G more powerful. If they decline, he will continue to kill officers and civilians until they do. Will El Mencho ever get caught? Will CJ&G's insatiable bloodlust ever be put to an end? Some of the most dangerous drug lords in business today are the ones we don't talk about. Kenny Jung-Ang Chin is one of them. If you look up his name online, you find one picture of him and the fact that he's one of the most wanted. Is one of them. If you look up his name online, you find one picture of him and the fact that he's one of the most wanted men by the DEA and civilians until they do. Will El Mencho ever get caught? Will CJ&G's insatiable bloodlust ever be put to an end? Some of the most dangerous drug lords in business today are the ones we don't talk about. Kenny Jung-Ang Chin is one of them. If you look up his name online, you find one picture of him and the fact that he's one of the most wanted men by the DEA. For an aspiring star, internet anonymity would be the worst nightmare. But for a brutal kingpin, it's the dream. No one knows who you are, where you are, and why you're sought out by the authorities. Kenny Jung-Ang Chin is wanted by the DEA for the huge quantity of heroin he distributes in the United States. And needless to say, when you control a large narcotics business, this comes with threats, violence, and even assassinations. But there's an even darker side to Jung-Ang Chin's story. Sadly, he employs minors to do his dirty work. This is wrong on so many levels, but for him, it's just business. Minors, especially if they're illegal immigrants, are much easier to corrupt with small money and much more unaware of the dangers of trafficking. If they end up arrested or even dead, it's not Chin who suffers. In his mind, they're just expendable. So you see why Chin is a wanted man, but he's so well hidden. It might be a while before the DEA finally gets their hands on him. This is Ramon Pascual Cipriano. He may not be the most dangerous drug lord on the list, but he is the youngest. He was born in 1997. As of 2022, he's just 25 years old, and yet he's one of the most wanted men in the US. He resides in California, and it's from there that he conducts business on behalf of the Sinaloa Cartel. Indeed, the notorious Sinaloa Cartel has people everywhere, and they go to extreme lengths to ensure their ever steady ascent. Cipriano is in charge of white powder distribution on the West Coast, but he is slowly climbing the ranks of the cartel, so he already has people working for him, wreaking havoc and spreading violence to protect him and his cartel. As he is still on the run and eluding the DEA, he could still grow in the Sinaloa network in the US, making them more powerful than ever. Cipriano can be seen as a symbol of just how dangerous and brutal narcotics gangs are in general. The cartels recruit people who will do anything to have money and power. Violent, vengeful people who don't care for justice and even get a kick from inflicting pain. Cipriano was born in 1997. Chin is even recruiting minors. How many young people are being recruited every single day into a life of unspeakable crime? And will it ever stop? As the young people grow up, they can become the new Escobar, El Chapo, or El Mayo.